5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
And welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. I am your host, Justin. Dan, welcome to the show, buddy.
Well, hi. It's great to be here. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. We're missing our third amigo with this.
Oh, no.
But he is in Arizona probably eating delicious Mexican food right now. So I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, I've got sympathy heartburn for him right now. I'm feeling it.
He did say it was 100 degrees, though. That kind of sucks.
Yeah. Ooh. I don't miss that. I'm from the desert.
Yeah.
I don't miss it at all.
Yeah, I'm from the high desert, and 100-degree days were kind of rare, believe it or not.
I've had my share. Many days where you're like, oh, it's only 101.
Only 101, right?
Only 101. It's not that bad. It's only 101.
That's awesome. Well, we've got a good show today. We're going to be talking about fudging.
We're going to make fudge. We've got a recipe for you. We'll do caramel fudge, double chocolate, and white fudge. It'll be lovely.
Fun story. When I was a Boy Scout, I had to fundraise for camp, and we made so much freaking fudge.
Oh my god!
It was unbelievable the amount of fudge we made, and to the point where it's in the beginning you're like, oh, we'll just eat a little nibble here or there. By the end, we're just like, there's no more fudge allowed in this house.
There's something wrong with fudge. There's something wrong when you go to a store, like a little boutique store, and they have a gigantic hunk of it, and they just cut you off a little sliver and sell you that for $5.
Yeah.
You know you're in dangerous territory.
You're like, and look, I know that this was just Hershey's chocolate chips in here, guys. I know, because I made the fudge. It's marshmallows and Hershey's fudge, or Hershey's chocolate chips.
So rich.
Yes.
Sorry,
but
we're
that's
not talking about that kind of fudge.
We're not. We're
going to talk about manipulating outcomes.
Yes.
Oh, we got a lot to say about this.
We do.
Ooh.
It'll be good. But of course, how was your Geek Week, Dan?
So geeky. All right. We played Gang Rush Breakout, which came out about 5 years ago, and I picked it up for a song. They're basically paying me to take it, and it has 5 little cars, and you're driving over this bridge, and the 3 of us played it, me and Jay, who is our missing host, and my buddy Sean. We had a fantastic time. It was a good game. Yes, the money is little teeny tiny pieces of almost paper, and they're a little tricky to deal with, but wasn't as bad as everybody said they were, like Tom Vassell. So Tom Vassell really hated the paper.
No.
Hated the paper money, really bad. And if you wanted to switch it out, you could, but then your cars couldn't sit on top of it. So it actually has a function. It's not completely ridiculous. It's just kind of, you have to be thoughtful when you're dealing with teeny tiny little dollar bills, smaller than, they're about a third of the size of your finger now.
Oh,
yeah,
that would be kind of tricky.
And they are kind of plasticky paper.
Who made the game?
Well, I'd have to go look at on my shelf.
Okay.
Should I do that, or should we keep talking?
Yeah, we'll just keep talking. Right, I didn't know if you knew it offhand.
Maybe I'll look it up in BGG while we're talking. Okay, so the whole point of the game is that 5 criminals have just finished a bank robbery, and you are trying to get away with the most money. And the person who is not last off the bridge with the most money wins the game, which really did change the strategy there. So let's see, who makes this? Came out in 2017. Designer was Galador and Henry Pym. I wonder if that's part of the... Oh, this is a CMON game.
Did you just say Hank Pym?
Henry Pym, Pym. Okay. I wonder if they have... That's how they got the car so small. They use Pym particles.
Exactly.
Dang. Yeah. So I got it. It was at MSRP'd for like 50-ish, 55, $60, something like that. I got it on sale for 15, and for 15,
Oh, wow.
we had a huge blast, and it was great fun. So you roll the dice to see how many actions you get, and then you kind of Yahtzee your way through doing some re-rolls, and there's all these obstacles on the bridge. You can put down huge, like, rusted containers and police. You could throw down cops. You can throw down barricades and caltrops and all this stuff. And it's like you put stuff down to prevent the other players from making progress in their game.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's good. It's good. It was only the three of us, though. We walked away going, that would be a completely different game with 5 cars on the bridge. So just FYI.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's a game that we want to put up on our YouTube channel for review. So
yeah, now we've broken the rules through. So now
Yeah.
we could do that. We could get together. We could do it.
we should do a five-person game and then review it.
Yeah,
that would be a
'cause
lot of fun.
We definitely need to play it once before we put it online. Otherwise,
Oh, yeah.
the review will be, now, what do we do here? What's going on here? What are we
Yeah,
doing?
for sure.
What's this? And I don't want it. It's not like we're doing live play, but it's so much easier to have an opinion of it after you've done all the struggling by yourself,
Right.
with
Yeah.
not being recorded for posterity. Yep.
Definitely.
So we played that. We also played an oldie but a goodie for me, Battle Station 2nd Edition. I own it and I ran it, and we had a great time. We were going to do 2 missions, or I was going to do just an easy peasy start out mission, nothing big. 2 ships, 1 planet. You have to clear out the alien ship from the planetary sector, and then we would have done a more interesting session with more things happening. However, I, as the GM kind of enemy player, started winning, and our little starter session went on all night.
Nice.
So, FYI, if you know the game well enough and you know how all the piping is wired to put things in your favor, then you can really mess up your players. So it was good. I usually it's like playing any like Descent or a game like that where you have one player who's the adversary, and it's kind of joyless because you're kind of designed. You're the bad guy, and everybody knows you're basically going to lose.
Yeah.
But I did it, and we had a great time, and everybody was on pins and needles thinking they were going to die at any given moment, and that means you've done a good job running a game. Battle Stations. For those who don't know, Battle Stations is from Guerrilla Games. It is written by a really great guy named Jeff Sidek. And the purpose of this game, for those who are unaware, is that the game takes place on 3 simultaneous maps. One is the map of your starship. One is the map of the space where you're flying around, and you also have your little ship flying around in space. And then you have a third and sometimes a fourth map of the other alien ships that you can beam over to. You can put yourself in a missile and missile yourself into their ship, and board via missile as well as beaming. And so you can run around the enemy ship, and you can, shiv the engineer so they can't generate any power. You can commandeer it and do all kinds of things. And they can beam all over your ship and do those same tactics.
Yeah.
And so if you're not working together as a crew, it's a highly cooperative game. There's really no way to win because if your job is in the sequence of events and if you're not teaming up with everybody else, they will fail. One of the great components of that game is it always feels like there are 3 things you want to do, but you only have 1 action. And so it's always like, man, if I could do 1, 2, and 3, everything would be fine. And everybody feels like that. So it always feels like you're only accomplishing about a third of everything you need to do every turn.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that kind of that helps the tension dial up. It's good. It's a fantastic game. It's in the 2nd edition. It's worth every penny. And Jeff is a heck of a great guy, Jeff Sayadek. And I met him at Gen Con, and I've never played this game and not had a blast. It is a little on the expensive side. I think I don't know what the MSRP is. It's probably around $100. Plus, there's a 100-page hardbound book that you can add to it to make it even cooler. That's another $60. So it's a little bit of an investment, but if you have somebody who takes one for the team and gets into it, it is straight up fun.
I mean, like, even if you've got a group of people who are willing to chip in like $15 each or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because like it can play up to how many people? Like 10 people?
10 players, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great.
Yeah.
We've done it for couples nights.
Yeah.
I ran it one time with my employees as our team building event. And like 2 years later, they came back and said, "How come we haven't done that thing again?"
Right.
Why can't we do that? I'm like, "Oh, okay, we can do that. That'd be fun."
Yeah.
So
That's great.
Yeah.
It's a great game. Very good.
My last Geek Week, I know we only do 2. I've been painting my literal guts out. I'm working
It's so
on
good. I'm so proud of you.
I'm working on my World of Smog, Rise of Moloch minis. I've been painting the core set plus the Arcanist expansion, which basically doubled the mini count and tripled the number of heroes that come in the game. There's only 4 heroes in the base game, and then they give you like, if you get the Arcanist box, I know I'm saying that wrong, you get like another 10 heroes and a whole couple dozen more.
Oh,
baddies.
that's awesome.
So, and they're all freaky deaky. This is all like crazy evil clowns from the 1890s. You got contortionists.
Nice.
You got the strongman wearing, those pullover, under, the strongman stripy, stripy onesies they wear.
Yep.
I mean, you've got Egyptian cultists. So I've used a lot of golds and copper paints.
Oh, fun.
And then putting a little bit of ink washes over them and to bring out all the details.
Yeah.
So I'm just having a ball painting these minis on a game I still haven't played yet.
I mean, welcome to the club, right? Like,
it's not like I haven't like played with this army. I've literally not sat down and played the mechanics of the game.
But you know what? It's gonna be fun though. It's gonna play way better. I did the same thing with my Cursed City box where I pretty much painted all of them, and then we sat down and played the game. And my cousin Lincoln, he was like, "This is so much better with painted miniatures."
Yeah,
it's
a better game.
And it totally is. It totally is. Other than having like little yellow or gray things staring at you.
So the funny thing is that, as you know, my brother Nate, who has been a guest on the podcast, he was talking to my sister, and she texted me last night at 10 o'clock saying, "What's the deal with contrast paint?"
Oh, very good.
Because she's been painting D&D minis for my nephew.
Oh.
For fun, and dragons for fun. And they're a big 3D printer family. They've got like 3 3D printers going. They have like a side business where they print Christmas ornaments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of them was a dumpster fire for 2020. I have a little I have a green dumpster on fire. But anyway, she's like, I need to know everything. I need to know everything about contrast paint. And so I gave the abbreviated version of our episode a few episodes back, and she's like, I want to listen to your podcast. So it was very strange. I had no idea my sister was into painting D&D minis in her spare time. She's like, it's so relaxing.
It's super relaxed. Do you feel relaxed when you're painting?
I do. Time flies really, really fast. So I'll put on a show that's light. I don't really have to think about, like, I've been listening to New Girl episodes. And they just,
I like how you say you've been listening to it, because like you're kind of listening to it.
And I've already seen it, so I know what everybody looks like, and I know all the plots, and I've already watched the whole series once. So it's all going through one ear and out the other, and I look up and I'm like, well, that was 8 episodes while I've just been sitting here painting, and and there's been a lot of late nights. So I guess what time flies when you're having fun. So I'm certainly having fun, and I'm not as stressed out about it. Because once your skill gets better, you're like, oh, well, that mini looks like crap. I don't care. I think it's fine looking like crap for what I wanted to do, and if I wanted to fix it, I know how I want to fix it.
There's a big liberation with that, like being able to just be like, you know what, like it's fine.
Yeah.
Because it's funny because you look at some of these like amazing artists that are on YouTube or Instagram.
They're great.
And they'll tell you that same thing, but there's a lot of us that are just like, no, it has to look display quality. You know what I mean? And like,
and you work up to that. You can't start that way.
You can't. And there's a big difference between painting an army and then painting like a display quality miniature.
There's display and tabletop and all the other shades of gray in between. And guess what? You cannot. No one's. When my daughter was 3 years old, she had been watching these Disney cartoons of ice skating where Minnie Mouse and Daisy Duck just put on the ice and just started doing ballet dances all across the ice. Well, she was 3 years old. She thought that's what ice skating was, and here I was. I spent an hour hunched over, holding her holding her up so she wouldn't crash, while all of her feet kicked nonstop, scrambled. It was like holding on to like a 30-pound bowling ball that was possessed by the devil, and you had ice skates on, and you were bent over holding it for an hour.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like it's not ice skating at the age of 3 thinking you're going to just make up your own, acrobatics moves. You actually have to acquire the skill. So I've been doing things like I did have a dump of my paint, my Citadel paint pot. I had a Citadel paint pot dump.
It happened, huh?
I lost 2/3 of a pot. And so now on Amazon, I went in and ordered squeeze bottles and little metal shaky ball bearings to stir it up. So I'm going to be transferring Citadel paint into generic paint bottles. That's my next thing.
Welcome to the club. And you'll probably get the X-Acto knife and cut off the label and tape it on so you have it.
Yeah.
That's the
on
next
my
step.
list. I watched them do that. I was so excited about. I'm like, what a fun tip. So, So that's what's going on with me in painting. I think I've caught the bug, and I'm enjoying that part of the hobby.
That's awesome, man.
Sorry,
That's really
it was super long. I took all of Jay's time.
Exactly, you took Jay's time, which is okay. Let's see. Last week I was at Universal Studios, Florida.
Woohoo!
On family vacation during spring break, so that was a lot of fun. We obviously spent a lot of time in Harry Potter World there.
So fun.
We did both sides, Diagon Alley and the Hogsmeade sections of Harry Potter World, and had a great time there. They really paid a lot of attention so that you really felt like you were kind of in that world, especially when you were going to get on some of the rides. Like there was the Green Gots experience, right, that you would go ride a ride, but like even just getting in there, like you would walk, like the line took you through like the main bank area, and then you would go downstairs and you would see like
really?
Yeah, Griff Hook's office, where he had the keys, and like you're just like, it was really cool because it looked just like the movies, and you're like, this is crazy. There was another experience through the castle where you would go and you'd see like little balconies where they had projections of Harry, Hermione, and Ron up to something, and you'd go through Dumbledore's study, and it was just
that feel real.
Oh yeah, and so we had a blast. The interesting thing is that Harry Potter World straddles what was the original Universal Studios park and then what became the Islands of Adventure. Mm-hmm. And the Islands of Adventure has the Jurassic Park area that has probably one of the best roller coasters that we've been on, which is the Velocicoaster. It's a very fast coaster, a lot of fun. And the Islands of Adventure also has the King Kong like areas and rides. It has some of the Marvel, like holdover Marvel stuff before Disney acquired it, which is it's kind of awesome.
We have it under contract.
Yeah, there's a Spider-Man ride, there's a Doctor Doom ride, there's a Hulk ride. Captain America was there, and I got a picture of my son with Captain America,
cool.
So it was kind of funny. But like, that's all like the Islands of Adventure area, right? Which is kind of a little bit older than the Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And, so the Universal Studios, it had, Men in Black ride. It had some Simpsons, like Simpsons Land, which was kind of awesome. There was like a restaurant at Moe's. You could go eat at Moe's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And they had like an E.T. ride. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the E.T. ride because you walked into this ride and we all agreed, hands down, like even more than Harry Potter, the line was amazing in there. You felt like you were in the Sequoia Forest.
Oh, really?
Like they had, you're inside of a building, right? but they had these huge trees that you would have to walk around. They had like ferns, they had like sounds and like stars. You looked up, saw stars, so you didn't see like rafters or walls and stuff. You literally felt and like the path you were walking on felt like it was dirt, you know. And so like you really felt like you were in the forest. And it was awesome. And my son was even like, dude, this is amazing in here. And it was a very dated ride. So you got on these bicycles, right? And you started doing the adventure where, you know, you're trying to run from the cops and you're flying over stuff and you're flying over the city. But the ET ride doesn't end where you would think it would end. You would think it would end by you dropping off ET at his spaceship and him flying home, which is the end of the movie, right? No, that's not where it ends. You go with ET to his planet.
Oh,
and that's when the acid trip begins.
What?
Dude, it's wild. There's like little ETs everywhere. There's these like pumpkin-headed creatures. There was this creepy doll face thing. And I'm like leaning over to my son. I'm like, where are we? And what did we eat before we got onto this ride? Like, it's like, you know, in Disneyland when you ride the Winnie the Pooh ride.
Yeah, the only
and
thing that helps there is everything is like, you know, big pieces of flat wooden boards painted with Winnie the Pooh crap.
Yeah,
you're like, this sucks, Disney.
Yeah, but you know, it's all like fluorescent black light stuff, and it feels like you literally are on an acid trip. Yeah. Like maybe the, you know, Huffalumps like kind of came into your dreams again. But that's how ET was, where you're just like, what is happening here? So, and then we get down, and I'm just like, did we even leave the planet, bro? Like, so it was a pretty good time. Yeah, I was like, I don't remember this happening on this ET, you know, adventure before.
I don't know what to do about that, man.
No, it was a good time. Universal Studios is a lot of fun. We ended up splurging for the fast passes, and it was very expensive, I will say that, but it was worth every penny. Like, just not waiting in line, dude.
There's an economist
it was a big difference.
Who I was listening to on another podcast saying you should always buy those every time, because if you start calculating your time, then you are grossly behind the financial power curve by not paying for those things.
And you are like, we did both sides of the parks. It took us 2 days to do them, and that's even with the fast passes. Yeah, you know, and yeah, it was a good time. Like we were lucky to be able to, like, we just walked on rides, like the ET ride, like the Men in Black ride, and some of these other ones. Some of the more popular ones we had to wait a little bit. There's 2 rides in particular that didn't have the fast passes, but having those made such a difference, where we're just like, you know what, let's just go try it. Because if we had looked at a ride and said 60 minutes and we knew that like time was limited, we probably wouldn't have tried the ride. You know? Yeah. We would have moved on to something else. So, yeah. And like, there's a point too where it's like you're spending X amount already, and I know that that's kind of a sunk cost, but if you spend a little bit more, your time is much more enjoyable. You know, and so that's kind of a threshold that I look at it too. You know, so anyway, but yeah, no, it was a really good trip. We had a great time with it, and looking forward to the next time that we go, which will probably be in a few years, but who knows.
Yeah, we just got season passes to Busch Gardens.
Oh, and nice. So, okay.
Let me tell you, I went on the Pantheon, which is the fastest 4-accelerator roller coaster in the world right now. And it did things to me. It did things to me I can't really describe. I got off and I saw another middle-aged man my age, and he looked at me, and I gave him a look, and he's like, "Oh, this is what I'm getting on?" And I'm like, "Yes, you're getting on something that's going to change you forever." So,
that's amazing.
Anyway, if you're in the area and you want to ride a good ride, ride that one, and you won't be the same person who steps off the ride. I'm not going to describe it. You go check it out on here.
That's funny. But yeah, that was because of the family vacation. That was pretty much my geek week. I mean, I guess I got one more thing. I finished a 40K novel called Warhammer 40K novel. It was called I cannot believe I'm blanking on it. It seems like why even bring it up then? It was. Oh my gosh! Like, why can't I remember this?
It'll come to you.
It was the Inquisitor, famous Inquisitor. Oh gosh, what is his name? Oh my gosh, it'll come to me later. Like, but anyway, I finished the novel. It was delightfully. Oh, Eisenhorn. Thank you.
Okay.
Eisenhorn Zenith. So Eisenhorn is like the he is like the quintessential Warhammer 40K Inquisitor, right? So it read sort of like a mystery novel because he's trying to get to the bottom of like this chaos cult that he's like following, you know? And it leads to like much deeper, obviously, like issues within the Imperium, you know.
Okay.
And so like, you know, there's like well-known, well-established families that are part of this chaos cult, and like it leads to them like going to like the outer edges of the universe, and it had some great action. It had some interesting, almost like horror aspects because you're dealing with chaos. You know, it had some good like mystery stuff. It was probably one of the better 40K novels out there, and it's widely regarded as one of the better 40K novels. You talk about Eisenhorn, and people know like who are, you know, involved in 40K know exactly who you're talking about, and our God Emperor himself, Henry Cavill, was once floated as maybe potentially playing an edition of, like a rendition of Eisenhorn, you know, even though I think that he would be better suited elsewhere. So, yeah. Anyway.
Well, I'm pessimistic about Warhammer making its way into other mediums.
Yeah.
I'm highly pessimistic. I'm doesn't mean I don't think it's impossible. I'm just pessimistic.
So you say that, it's kind of interesting, and so Warhammer Plus is a thing that they have put out. It's a subscription service, and it allows you to use their service to build lists for 40K and Age of Sigmar. I think it's like $60 a year or something like that, and but they also have like bonus painting videos that are like maybe a little bit more advanced skill type stuff than the ones that they show on YouTube. Like, because the ones that the Warhammer puts on YouTube are like 2-minute videos of like, here's how you base coat it, here's how you do that, here's how you do that, you know. But this one's like, here's how you can paint bottles, you know, like here's how you can paint lenses or something like that. That's like cool. A little bit more, you know, involved. But they've been creating some animated series as well on there. So they've been getting into more animated. So they've got like classically animated, like 2D cartoon stuff. They've got some anime style stuff, and then they've got some more like, you know, computer generated animated shows that they're putting out there. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, like there's been some criticisms of the quality of some of these things, and I think some of them are right and some of them are okay, but look, they're not as bad as the Halo series. It's on Paramount right now.
Well, I haven't even started on that, and I'm paying for Paramount.
Oh, listen, let me tell you how bad the CGI is in that show.
Oh, is it?
It's so bad. It is so bad.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's like it reminds me of low budget Battlestar Galactica.
From back in the day, or original?
From back in the day. Back in the day.
Really?
Yeah. Well, no, from like, you know, around 2000.
From 2000. Okay.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, like,
not from
you look
1979.
right. You look at Battlestar Galactica now, and you're like, okay, like, this wasn't the greatest. Right. I mean, they were on a budget, obviously, and it does what it needs to do to, you know, help us understand about Cylons, and some of the explosions look a little wonky, or, you know what I mean, stuff like that.
But you know they were doing that on a total shoestring. I don't think Halo was done on a shoestring.
But it looks like it was done on worse than a shoestring. It's so bad. And like my son and I were watching it, and we're like, why does this look so bad? Like, we both are looking at each other like, are you seeing this too? Like, it's just no good. So I'll do another Geek Week on the Halo series because I'm struggling with it.
Yeah, and I'll get around to working on Picard. I have a hard time. I'm caught up with it, but I'm still ingesting what it is trying to say, and I still don't understand after all these episodes what they're really trying to say here. So.
I watched 2 episodes of it. I'm like, where are we going with this?
Yeah. I'm going to get to the end of it, and then I'm going to form an opinion.
I think that's fair.
So right now, if I just did it based on the episodes, the binge bait endings of every episode, like, oh, now you've got to tune in for next week because we left you with another cliffhanger. It's like, guys, it doesn't feel like Star Trek. I'm sorry. I'll stop. I'm going to shut up now. We're going to go to the news.
Let's do the news.
Welcome to Tabletop and Beyond News.
Wow, that was a very dramatic music this time, Dan.
I just wanted to give it some oomph.
Yeah, that was definitely some oomph.
Yeah, give it some oomph. All right, this is a real deal important announcement. Wizards of the Coast announced they are acquiring D&D Beyond from Fandom for a cost of $146 million. The sale has been approved by the boards of both companies, but will require regulatory review and other standard hurdles, meaning the sale will not close until the second or third quarter of 2022. Originally launched in 2017, D&D Beyond was created by Curse LLC, which was then owned by Amazon through their subsidiary Twitch. In 2018, Fandom purchased D&D Beyond along with some other assets from Curse. So, what does this mean? If you've been living under a rock, you may not know that one of the best ways people get into D&D digitally is through D&D Beyond.
Yeah, for sure.
If you've also been living under a rock, you would know that if you bought a book digitally, you don't get it in hard copy or vice versa.
Yep.
And this would be why. So we do know there's another big announcement coming out from Wizards of the Coast in the next couple weeks. I think this proves that the D&D Beyond digital experiment was a massive success.
Massive success. And we've done an episode on D&D Beyond.
Yes.
And I think we even did a bit of an update in a further one. And look, first off, I didn't realize that it was bought by Fandom in 2018. I thought that they had it. I didn't know the Curse LLC is part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since 2018, I can tell you this, like, they have put in a lot of work on that D&D Beyond. Now, I mean, what's amazing is that you can now click on things on your character sheet and it'll roll dice for you, right? So if you've got like, to hit with advantage, you can click that and it will roll 2 dice and take your top one and then put the result in the game log. So, and I can see all of that, and they've done like an experimental encounter builder where you basically put your people in there, everybody hits roll initiative on their sheet, and it automatically populates it into the tracker. And then I can do roll all monsters initiative, and it'll randomly roll their initiative and then start the encounter, like in the order that you should be going. So rolling initiative in D&D Beyond takes literally 10 seconds. And it's just amazing. And you just keep hitting next to go through.
There's a shared notebook that everybody's contributing to, right? So the GM sees it all? Or is it just all on your own silo?
No, I mean, there's a game log that you can go to, but what happens is, and this is something that they could get better at, is having the shared experience. So what I would love to see, there's 2 things I really want to see happen. The first one is like maybe a better Twitch integration, or some sort of video integration that you could do with Zoom or something like that, where you could have an overlay of your screen so that you can see the dice roll and everybody can see it roll. Because what happens is like if one player clicks roll their dice, they'll only see the result. The other players will only see the result pop up in the game log. So they don't get the glory and triumph of seeing a 1 roll into a 20. You know what I mean? And that kind of thing. So I would love to see like a more video friendly aspect of it show up, so that you didn't have to like run Zoom and D&D Beyond separately,
Yeah.
and that you could share your dice and screens and stuff like that a little bit better.
Well, I would hope that they wouldn't do their own. They wouldn't roll their own. They should
I
just
agree.
partner with somebody or build a plugin for, like, there's a Zoom marketplace now or something like that.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah,
could, now that
100%.
they could use the APIs to integrate it, which would be cool. Would be super
Yeah.
cool.
The second thing that I hope to see from this is that now that Wizards of the Coast owns this, I mean, let me back up. The main reason that you couldn't get the digital book and the physical book is because they were two separate companies, right? Like D&D Beyond needed to make money supporting their platform by selling the digital versions of the books that you could then integrate with your games, which are seamless integrations, by the way. Like, they're absolutely amazing. So, like, that's cool, right? But what I would love to see is that if you buy a physical copy of the book now, that you get, either a code that gives you the digital one, or even like a, $10 digital book, where it's a one-time use code, you pay $10, and you also get the digital book.
That's
I mean, I would
all
be
we've
willing to do that.
wanted. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I've been waiting for that for so many months. I finally, because my daughter's running her first campaign, I bought myself a copy of the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide. I mean, I've been waiting, like, this stuff came out, 2014, and I've just been dragging I'm like, well, if this comes out, if this starts to come out, I'd like to have both physical and digital copies. That would be ideal. But I'm like, okay, well, I'm out of time, and I'm just going to get them just because she can use them, and I'll have them on my bookshelf to use one if I want to. But it's like such a no-brainer. Why wouldn't they just do that? And everybody kind of forgives Star Wars because it's like, oh yeah, Star Wars digital and Star Wars analog have had this long-standing thing because Electronic Arts has this supposedly ironclad contract. But then suddenly when Fantasy Flight Games got a hold of the license, they were putting out Star Wars dice rollers and a few Star Wars things. So we're like, why wouldn't Wizards of the Coast before ever try to integrate analog and digital together?
Yeah.
And now we just kind of know. It's like, I think they let this Twitch, this other company, just do it in case they failed. They could wash their hands of it. They'd get their licensing fee and go, oh gosh, well, it sucks to be you. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And that is, and now they're looking at a raging success. And that's the key entry point into new players into the game. So they've got to put down the money to own it.
Yeah.
One of our friends is very pessimistic. He thinks they will destroy this resource.
Yeah, he's always pessimistic about that kind of stuff, though.
He's kind of our Debbie Downer on everything. If he's listening,
we love you, buddy.
We love you, Bartholomew.
Yeah, right. I don't know that they'll destroy it. I just hope they put as much like TLC in it as fandom did, because really, like, I mean, if you think about it, like, that was their livelihood. Selling the books and getting people onto their platform was their livelihood.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast doesn't really need that because they can sell the books elsewhere, you know?
Just took the words, I was going to make that exact same point, and you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that they obviously see the value in it if they're willing to pay $146 million for
I
it.
think that's where they figured out where all their new players are coming from. They're not coming from game shops. They're not coming from as much word of mouth from those traditional outlets. I think if a bunch of teenagers got together today and wanted to play D&D and one of the kids had the book, all the other kids would go on D&D and Beyond. And that's just all that would happen. Well, guess what? That's the next how many generations of gamers right there. And that's where that's their starting point, not their end point. That's their starting point. And those books MSRP at $50 a pop, the thin ones.
Right. Yep.
So it's like, what do they ask? They want each one of these kids to go drop $50 on a player's handbook?
Right. And I early on got like the founders pack because I got involved
early
in
on.
D&D like when it first came out in 2017,
D&D
right?
Beyond, I know, and I'm like, that's gonna be such a waste of money.
Yeah, and so it's so funny because it's like I was so excited about it because it's like it launched like right after Gen Con.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm so into this. I'm going to do it, right? And so I spent the money, and it
the
was a
rest of
couple
us are like,
$100.
oh, you're just
Yeah.
setting money on fire. That's all gonna disappear
Yeah.
in 6 months.
Now it's like tripled. If I want to get those same things, it's like triple, quadruple the cost, you know? So I'm like, oh, okay, that was a good idea.
All right. I think it's literally the same price, isn't it? Isn't it literally the same price as the digital? I could be wrong. Somebody correct us in the comments or something. But it feels like it's basically the same price, right?
Yeah.
So almost identical.
So but I got it back then, and the nice thing is that my daughter uses my D&D Beyond account now to create all of her characters because she has access to so much stuff.
Yeah.
Why
you know.
wouldn't she? So yeah, exactly.
Well, we've seen the
So
future. It's D&D and Beyond, and that $140 million didn't grow on trees. So those were old school gamers spending money on parchment pressed into thin sheets with ink that just paid for Hasbro to go buy that company.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure.
Let's be optimistic. I hate to be internet hater trolls, so I think they have an opportunity. They have an. I think they're. I'm optimistic too. They have an opportunity to really leverage that space and change the hobby permanently. If they got smart about it, they could permanently change the hobby forever. If they really got creative. So
it would. I think it would force other game systems to have to figure out a solution, whether that is go to like a Roll20 solution, or something like, you know what I mean? Like there's gonna need other systems would need to figure out an online content management system.
Yeah. I've always talked about this in the past, where there'll be a date in the future where people are still playing RPGs. Everyone comes in with a rectangular digital device.
Yep.
And all the devices are aware of each other. They're aware of what game's being played. The GM is aware. People are rolling things, and it just happens seamlessly. And this was my vision. You can talk to Jay. I was like, this is what the future is going to be. I talked to him about like 6 years ago. He's like, yeah, we should build that app and do it ourselves. We, of course, never did that because we have lives and families and stuff. But they could do it. If anybody could do it, it would be Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
With this, they could take D&D Beyond and really push it beyond, and really change the game forever if they wanted to.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. Next news. Whoa, we spent a lot of time on that. All right. Talk about the One Ring starter set.
So it is up for sale now. I'm really excited about it because this is the second edition of the One Ring that came out. And it is available on Miniature Market for $34.99 right now, which is not a bad price for a starter set. We had talked about RuneQuest, which is at $50. What was it? Our other set of Cthulhu was like $25 ish. So coming in at $35 is pretty good. It contains a 24-page volume of condensed rules, 53-page compendium covering the 4 farthings of the Shire. 32-page volume containing 5 exciting adventures to play. So you get 5 adventures out of this, which is pretty good. 8 double-sided pre-generated character sheets, which is cool. A huge full-color double-sided map showing the Shire and Eriador.
I have a weakness for the nice maps.
I know, me too. 30 war gear cards for weapons and armor. 6 double-sided journey roll and combat stance cards. 2 D12 feat dice and 6 D6 success dice. 6 D6 success dice. Wow,
so
say that 5 times fast.
D12s and D6s for
D6s, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay.
It sounds like it's more a D6 based game, I imagine. Like the D12 is a feat dice, so I think that's probably situationally specific, So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where we kind of end up with this, but I am interested in picking this up because I've got a little bit of a weakness for starter kits, RPG
I
starter sets,
noticed.
because
You're
I mean,
starting
I
to
do. I
collect
love them.
Yeah,
I love them. I mean, they're a lot of fun, and especially when it advertises, that you've got 5 adventures in here. So even if you bought this game and you never bought anything else, and you played 5 adventures of hobbits running around in the Shire and Eriador,
Yeah.
would you call that a success for $35? That's $7 a session.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
That's a huge set. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Right. And you can,
if you
and
get
then you
bored
can
with
go from there.
RPGs, beginner boxes are the way to go.
yeah.
If you're like, no, I want to learn all the arcane things and take my characters to level 20, maybe starter kits are not for you. But if you're like, hey, I can do 4 or 5 sessions of this and then I want to move on to another genre, another system.
Yeah.
Go beginner box.
And they've got, I mean, obviously they've got a bunch of other stuff on here. Like, for example, you can get the core, this is a miniature market when I say on here. The One Ring 2E RPG core rules is only $40 if you
Okay.
want to invest in that afterwards. The people who made this are the ones who did the Alien RPG.
Which you guys
that-
liked. I think.
I don't think we've played it. I haven't played it. The
didn't,
Alien
didn't
one.
Justin play? Not Justin, Jason play. I
I don't know if he played it.
I think he
I
wanted
think
to.
I think he wanted to.
Yeah.
I think it's relatively new as well. But the Alien one came out, and there's like the Colonial Marines expansion that had just dropped too. This group is also the one that did the Tales from the Loop board game
Oh yeah.
that we kind of talked about before. So they have some interesting games that they are doing, and I think that the Alien RPG plays similarly. I think it's a D6 D12 system as well.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested to see what they did with it, because the One Ring used to be with Fantasy Flight Games, didn't it?
I don't think so. It has changed. No.
Oh no, you know who it was with? It was with Cubicle 7.
Yeah, that's correct.
They were the ones that were doing the Warhammer RPGs. Cubicle 7.
Yep,
And
yep,
they
yep.
owned it as well. They owned the IP for a while as well. And I think that their version of it, and this is the first edition, their version was a D100 similar to the other ones. I could be totally wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that that's what it was.
Well, the Lord of the Rings RPG system has gone. I think it's like Star Trek. It's gone through the license. Has gone through a lot of different publishers over the years, so it's kind of hard to generalize exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
sure.
let me just say, going back to the topic of starter kits, I don't think the FFG Star Wars RPG would have been half as successful as it turned out to be if the starter kits were not so compelling as a product.
Man, they're amazing. I
For
love
$20,
them.
you get the dice, which are worth $15. Beautiful colored documents, an extra adventure online, 2 extra printable characters online. You still that still took a little extra work, but for $20-ish, $25-ish, they were such a good value.
Yeah.
And so it just hooked everybody. It was just such a hook. So
my brother is running the D&D starter kit, the Minds of Fendelver,
okay.
For his son's birthday party coming up this weekend.
Wow.
And I was like, oh yeah, cool. Like, he's like, oh, I think I need to go like print out some maps or something. I'm like, wait, like there's no maps in there? Like, dude, this D&D starter kit just basically has a couple pre-gens and a little booklet. And I'm like, weak.
Yeah, I know.
Like
they're just printing their own money. It's like,
oh my gosh. I was like, that is the lamest starter set ever, because it's like cost them $20-something.
The cheapest dice you could ever lay your eyes
Oh
on.
yeah. I mean, it cost him $20-something for that D&D starter set.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I paid the same thing for Cthulhu, and I had all these amazing handouts to give out, and maps, and all this other stuff that we had, all these pre-gen stuff, access to the online repository where you could go make your more characters and all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh man.
Wizards is always profit taking off those beginner boxes, while other companies use them as a loss leader.
Yep.
Totally
for sure.
different model.
For sure. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
Great piece of news, though.
Yeah. Speaking of RPGs,
We have a lot of RPG news today. I've
We
been trying
do.
to do less RPG news, and you've been inserted lots of RPG news.
I did because there was a lot that came out. The Dark Souls RPG Collector's Edition was released to several members, experienced RPGers, and their collective feedback was, this has a lot of problems. Yeah. So Dark Souls Tabletop RPG is full of problems according to British players who got it early, and this was on the Polygon .com news site. It says the collector's edition of the rulebook is out and it's not great. So, yeah, I threw that over to
playtest, then publish.
Yeah, exactly. I threw this over to Jason and being like, "What do you think of this?" Right? And he's like, "This is the problem with like totally buying into IPs, like, and investing in everything about an IP, right? Like, you just not everything is equal when it comes to, like, he loves Dark Souls. Obviously, we talked about ad nauseum last time about Elden Ring and stuff like that. So, they're saying stuff that's like, there's major inconsistent play. I'm going to read a paragraph. Players on Reddit are pointing out all kinds of major inconsistencies with the rule sets, which is based on a open source version of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So it's not like they are inventing this thing from scratch, right? Like they're using the mechanics from D&D 5e. For instance, certain classes like the Knight don't have enough strength at level 1 to wear their own starting armor.
That's a playtest fail.
While the caster's starting stats won't allow it to wield one of the weapons recommended to them. Meanwhile, no one is even totally sure how death is supposed to work in here, right? Which is kind of a key component with Dark Souls. Is like you die and you come back, you die and you come back, right?
Yeah.
So, it sounds like they're struggling.
Well, let me throw in a bunch of other IPs under the bus along with Dark Souls, because Dark Souls death and rebirth is a key theme of the game. I hate to break the news to you, but almost every sci-fi RPG, without exception, has crappy starfighter combat rules.
Yes.
That always feel
I was thinking
a little
about
wrong
that.
and
Yeah.
off. So I don't think. I'm going to give Dark Souls a pass and say some things are harder to do than others.
I agree. And look, I mean, I was thinking about that with Rogue Trader the other day. Rogue Trader was at its best when it was not in space.
Why is that?
And we tried to make it. Tried to make it fun, but it's like the best. And it's hard to. We even tried I tried to experiment on like making a ship feel more like a ship, and it didn't work.
It didn't work, right? And that's why I keep gushing about the Star Trek Adventure system. It's because actually space combat is fun and interesting, and well thought out and well executed. And it's really simple. You make the ship a character, an NPC, and that NPC is trying to help the other players accomplish what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental there. It's like, okay, well, so you use the same system as you would two characters trying to fix a thing together. The ship is trying to help you do a thing. It's like, well, I'm trying to shoot that guy. Okay, well, how is the ship going to help you? Right?
Yeah.
And how are we going to take damage? And that's it. And it is actually really seamless and fun. And we give the engineer the job to roll for the ship, right? Oh, you're the engineer, so you roll. Instead of the engineer sitting there waiting for something to break, the engineer's like, "Oh, I'm gonna help you do the assist on the scanning roll or on the cloaking or something like that." And it can be super fun. They don't have to be written badly. So, going back to Dark Souls. Playtesting really matters. No game will survive contact with the player base, but from the things that you're talking about, every single one of those notes should have been caught in another 4 weeks of playtest.
Yeah, I agree. So to end on a high note, in my opinion, one more piece of RPG news is that Blade Runner, the role-playing game, will drop on Kickstarter on May 3rd.
What if this one sucks?
So, yeah. So, interestingly, the people who are doing this, they're not the same people who are doing the One Ring, but they're using the Year Zero engine, a game engine, which was used in Alien RPG and Tales from the Loop and Forbidden Lands RPGs.
Yep.
So it's not the same company that did One Ring, as I said. I believe that it's a different company, and but they're using the same engine. Oh no, you know what? I lied.
You liar!
Same company. It's Free League Publishing. Same people who just put out the One Ring. So I believe that it's, again, the D6, D12 thing that they're using, because that is their engine that they have done. So I'm very excited about this. I think that this looks really good. It takes place in between the first movie and the second movie. In between the Harrison Ford Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. And so, I would say that the one aspect where I hesitate a little bit with Blade Runner the game is where I had issue with the Witcher RPG, which is that if you're going to be playing the Witcher RPG, everybody wants to be a Witcher. And so I wonder if this game is built in such a way that everybody wants to be a Blade Runner, or are some of the other classes or, kind of playable characters, are they more as compelling as being a Blade Runner?
Well, first of all, the artwork just on their website alone, bladerunner-rpg.com, is really gorgeous. So that means
it's amazing.
They're going to, obviously this is all original artwork. None of these are stills from the films, plural. So that means it'll be very immersive. The one reason why I will not back this is because I already have Android Shadow of the Beanstalk for the Genesis system.
Right.
And frankly, I could totally run. I have a book. I could just run Blade Runner, and I have all the rules for replicants and flying cars and the whole 9 yards. So I don't need this. I'm not in the market for this because I've kind of pre-bought a generic system that already squatted this territory. That's actually drafting. I mean, the Android universe kind of drafts off of, both Blade Runner and The Expanse. So it's kind of hard to, throw them under, anyway, long story short, I'm not going to be into it. If you guys buy it, I'll play it. If it's gritty and dark.
So half of these games, and this is part of the reason why I love getting some of these like more, I don't know if indie RPGs are the right word, but half of these games, I love running these little one-off kind of random RPGs at our guild con.
Yeah,
I love it. I love not running D&D or Star Wars or something like that we play all the time. Yeah, I love the one-shots where I can play, hey, let's play Warhammer 40k Death Watch, where you're Space Marines running around for 4 hours. That sounds like a lot of fun, right?
Yep.
Let's play Cthulhu. Let's play, Rune Quest. Let's play, let's do some of these other ones.
And that totally works as long as you've given everybody a good character and they are slightly stronger than the main threat, even though they should feel fear, right? Like, oh no, my character's about to die. It's when a game kind of reserves its best fireworks for when you level up. D&D does this. Yeah. D&D, the best fireworks, you just got to wait until you level the freak up before things get interesting. And so it like begs you to keep playing the same character over and over and over again. Yeah. The leveling system, I'm going to say, in Star Trek is universally kind of panned as not that useful. So you start playing a character that's not going to be too far off of the character you end with, right? No matter how many missions you play. So one of your incentives to come back is not to squeeze out more XP and to just get that extra +1. But somehow in D&D, that's like the crack that everyone's always chasing with their character, because those fireworks are reserved for higher levels.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
We have so much to say. We have so many important thoughts that we want to tell you, our listeners, about.
Yeah, like there's a lot of stuff I feel like, and I don't know if you feel this way too, but things hit things hit the pause button for a while during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see a real boom
There's a
in the gaming
deluge.
industry as like things are starting to come out. Like there's a lot of things coming out all at once, I feel like. And maybe it's just me being more astute and attentive, but I really do feel like things that were put on hold are now like being released quite a bit.
And even when supply chain stuff is being locked up, there are things like I said, I've just gotten into World of Smog. When the supply chain was saturated back in the 2017s, 2018s, all that stuff is still on the shelves.
yeah.
So you can say, oh, well, my latest and greatest, I don't know when it's going to come out because I don't know when that ship is going to leave the COVID-infected port, right?
Yep.
Who cares? Go back 5 years. What was hot then?
Yeah.
Go try something that you missed. And by the way, there's 12 expansions for it, if you love it. So I'm glad new things are coming out, but don't let... there's no way you'll go to your grave playing every game that you would like.
Right.
And you would enjoy. So the only way you know what you like, what you enjoy is to play more and more games and say, I like this kind of game, I don't like this kind of game. Speaking of games that we enjoy and why, let's switch to our main topic.
Let's do it. So our main topic today is about fudging. And again, we're not making fudge here. We're doing the fudging.
We're not going to pack this full of a lot of fudge.
So this kind of came up the other day. I was in the Dungeons and Dads Facebook group the other day, and one of the guys posted in there and said, hey, I normally don't fudge my dice rolls, but I'm starting to see why I should, because they were in an encounter and during my session I had 5 PCs die. And I'm like, wow. And he said one guy had 2 characters die, like in that night, And he said it was crazy. He's like, yeah, I mean, there's like 5 of them, and they were like at a combat rating of 2 and something else, which is like hard, but it's not like that lethal. He's like, dude, they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and I was rolling so hot, And so I'm like, okay, well.
You
so
also
it's kind
brought
of funny.
this up in our episode about RuneQuest. You
Yes,
mentioned that
I did.
You know how you like to fudge.
Right, exactly. So
If
let's
you fudge it.
start with the basics. Dan, what is fudging?
Classic fudging from a GM's perspective or a DM's perspective is you play the game behind a Game Master screen or Dungeon Master screen, and you make the noise of it rolling dice. And when you see a roll you don't like as the Game Master, you say, well, I'm the Game Master. I have a thing called GM Fiat, which I can change the game at a whim, and I could say that dice was a different number than what showed up.
And you can fudge to help the players, or you can fudge to hurt the players.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, fudging can go both ways.
Yes. Sorry. I'm going to try not to. I'm getting my head out of the gutter.
Stop it, Dan.
I'm sorry. Okay. So, do we want to go into the question of whether it's good or bad, or talk about why we would do it first?
Let's talk about why you would do it. Why would you fudge the dice rolls? And actually, let me back up a little bit, because I think that there's different ways that we can fudge.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's something too.
Oh, I only explained one way.
Yeah, exactly.
The other way is
which
to
is
ignore rules.
Ignore rules, exactly. Or maybe not ignore rules. That's another way. Let's talk about that.
Or there you can ignore rules. Okay, here's one way. You can mess with the dice. 2, you can ignore rules. 3, you as the GM know that you could use a rules as written opportunity to help or hurt the players, and you pull that punch. You decide not to do that just out of your own autonomy.
Right. And so example of that that I have done in the past is that I had a player who was very attached to this character. Very, very, very attached. And I didn't want to create a negative play experience.
Yes.
Yet the group found themselves in a situation where they were hurting bad. And this player made some choices that probably weren't the smartest. and literally was about to die.
Yep.
And the monster that I had the opportunity to literally destroy this player, and probably should have, like how I normally play the monsters, right? Because the player had like 3 health, and generally, I mean, as a DM, like that monster attacks that person until they go unconscious or something like that, right? But had this monster done it, it would have killed him. And so I assessed that the player had fallen prone, was hurting really badly, was injured, right? And so I had the monster, quote unquote, assess the situation and see that this was no longer a threat, and that the bigger threat was over at the door.
Oh, yeah.
Where another healthier player was.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Spread the damage around.
Spread the damage around. Exactly. And so this is where I pulled my punch, because I could have gone for the jugular on that one so easily, and killed this off. And Dan, I'm kind of known as a lethal GM sometimes. Yep.
Yes,
you know, so I don't really hesitate to kill players' characters, and my players know this about me, so they should always have a backup character, which they did, you know. But I knew that this player was so attached to their character, and we were close to the end of the campaign that I'm like,
it's just not worth it.
It's just not worth it. You know what I mean? I really didn't want to create a negative play experience, and so I pulled the punch. And it's funny because Jason looked at me like, I know what you're doing.
You just nerfed the monster.
Yes, exactly. Like he looked at me, he's like, I know what you're doing.
But what you're doing is, okay, so let's stand back here, okay?
Yeah.
There's one school of thought. I'm going to call this the Abed Nadir school of thought. Now, Abed Nadir has been a game master on a TV show, because he's a character, on NBC prime time twice. Okay. Which is pretty good. I think is a little bit better than Matt Mercer in some ways. Matt Mercer never got to do his shtick on NBC during primetime Thursday night comedy, right? So there's 2 quotes, one from each of the D&D episodes of Community, where Abed says, "I have to be impartial or the game has no meaning." That's quote 1, which is he's just, and first of all, his character on the show is, you know, pretty kind of a rigid. They acknowledge early on that he has Asperger's, right? The second quote is, "I owe you nothing. I am a dungeon master. I create a boundless world and I bind it by rules. Too heavy for a bridge, it breaks. Get hit, take damage. Spend an hour outside somebody's front door fighting over who gets to kill him. He leaves through the back. He's out there somewhere. You might find him if you get your crap together." So there's kind of 2 schools of thought. And the Abed school of thought is, look, it's a game because it's a game, right? If you stop playing a game, it becomes just pretensies time, or you're writing a screenplay together, right? Where there's literally no bounds. The rules and the dice create boundaries that allow other more interesting things to happen. So there's
and just to add to that, I think that the game has to feel like it has consequences. Otherwise, you can go on a murder hobo streak and who cares? It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So consequences have to happen for choices that are made in these types of games. Otherwise, decisions don't matter that much, right? Like they don't. And in fact, the best experiences that I have had, both as a GM and as a player, are when the consequences, you know that they're there, but they're not as clear as black and white. Yeah. And so the players choose something and realize, oh crap, like this is choosing between a turd sandwich and a crap sandwich. Yeah. And we know what the consequences are, and we just have to kind of like deal with it, right? And so, I mean, the game does have to have it does have to have boundaries, and it does have to have consequences. Mm-hmm. And if you get rid of them, then you might as well, like you said, you're just playing pretensies.
Yeah, you're just doing backyard fun time, which is not. We're not playing pretend in the backyard. We're playing a game, right? The other side of the spectrum, the other argument is the social contract of coming together and playing a game. Whether it's a role-playing game or a board game or a war game, right? The purpose of uniting with another human being to do this is to have fun. And that's the social contract. So the idea is that it's going to be fun for the GM. It's going to be fun for the player. Everybody will walk out and say, that was fun. We should do that again. And you violated the social contract where everybody walks out of an RPG session and says, I don't want to play in this session anymore. Or I don't want to run this game anymore. Something was unfun. And I've been in those sessions. I've been the reason for those sessions, or somebody else has been one of those reasons for those sessions. Those actually exist. So you could say, when it comes to the negative play experience, you could say you want to fudge the rules in order to keep up your end of the social contract.
Right.
Which is, hey, I don't want to have a negative play experience, right? I don't want somebody, doing a hangdog look and slouching out the door and going, well, that was a waste of time. That wasn't fun. So you'll have people that you play with, whether it's RPGs or board games or anything, that are trying to get their own kind of fun out of what you're doing, and you have to be sensitive to that, and you have to be self-aware of what's fun for you.
Yeah.
And if you're super self-aware, you'll know how to do self-sacrifice, which is what you did in your example, which is you're like, well, I could eat this character if that was fun for me, right?
Right.
But what was fun for you was keeping the campaign going and keeping the story going and keeping the energy alive and keeping the band playing music instead of saying, I'm going to play this song whether it breaks up the band or not.
Yeah.
So those are the two sides of the spectrum. So it's not about fudging being good or bad. It's about fudging meeting objectives, right?
Yes. So let me ask you this. Does the system that you are playing help dictate that? So for example, if I'm playing D&D, here's a better example. If I'm playing Star Wars, where it's really difficult for a player to die, we've established this.
This is
right?
settled law.
Where we've established this, versus a game like Shadow of the Demon Lord, which can be very, very lethal, or RuneQuest, which can be very, very lethal, right? And so,
or in the case of Cthulhu, you're likely to go insane.
Yes, exactly,
which is a different kind of player death.
Yeah, and so knowing the type of game that you're playing, are you more likely to, say, pull punches in RuneQuest or Cthulhu versus Star Wars?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question.
Do you see what I'm saying?
If you're a game master, and you say before in session 0 or before your next story arc or before your next session, you should say, your characters are not immortal gods.
Right.
They're going to take damage and they're going to die, and part of what I need to do is create a universe where that's a possibility. That's a clear and credible threat. Yeah. And if you die, this is what you will do. And you say, when your character dies, these 3 consequences happen. You get this much XP, you have another character in a folder or something like that. You're going to keep playing the game. We want you to have fun. But that character who exists in fiction is now, the end of their story has been found. Now, you got to do that up front, because sometimes when you start a new campaign, everyone has starry-eyed, ideas of becoming the greatest wizard that, Forbidden, Realms has ever seen. They're like, wow, I can't wait to make this character level 20. He's going to be so amazing. Well, it's really hard as the GM to say, well, I'm probably going to, that would mean you played, 400 sessions with me. There's a 1 in 400 chance that character is going to die. Right. That's a different kind of conversation. So if you're around people that are more interested in telling this same story, or they're writing their own fan fiction about their characters, or they pay attention to this is a normal thing that people do. If they're paying attention to all of the fluff or that's not on the stat block. Yeah. That's usually a pretty good indicator that the stat block is only kind of a means to get the game going, to get the character on screen in their brains, which means they're less interested in the the rules create the meaning Abed Nadir version of the game, which is a simulation, which is, I took a knife wound and now I'm dead. That this is how knife wounds work in this game. Therefore I'm dead. Whatever.
So
yeah, let's go ahead.
So to kind of recap what you're saying is in session 0, by you establishing kind of the social contract with your players, right? Which that's exactly what you're doing, right? Is you're saying like, hey, this game is very lethal. That's why you'll always have a backup character that's at the same level of yours, and we'll work them back into the game somehow, right? They find them in prison somewhere, or they sleeping on the bench or whatever it is.
You have a twin sister.
Don't worry. Don't worry. We'll work you back into the game, but your characters will probably not make it, right? That's a social contract that you're making with them. And usually the player's like, okay, I get it, right? And like, I think a big fear is like, what happens when my character dies? Does that mean I have to go home?
Yeah.
You
have to dispel all that stuff early on.
So if you make that what you're saying is if you make that social contract with them, you are now less likely to pull your punches, fudge the dice rolls, do that kind of thing with them in the game because they know that the hurt can be coming for them.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Or they have an opportunity to express that that's a negative play experience. Right.
Yep.
You could say, I'm not sure if I want to play this if it's going to be that lethal. Right.
Right.
Or maybe I shouldn't get emotionally invested in this character if I know I've got her twin sister in this folder that I will be playing, if the worst of the worst happens.
Yeah.
And so at least you address it early on. And you can address this mid-campaign too. You certainly can. At that point in time, everybody's a lot more invested in your characters. And mid-campaign, you should be thinking about what's the biggest thing these characters are going to do in their lives and how do we kind of bring this campaign, how do we land the plane in several sessions. You do have people who believe they should be playing the same character for 10 years. I know those people. I'm friends with those people. That is a perfectly adequate way to play these role-playing games. I've never played a character for 10 years. I don't know how that feels. I have folders full of characters from 10 years ago. Am I going to pull any of those out and play them? Probably not.
Right.
But there are people out there, and that's part of the fun for them. They don't want to level up fast. They want to drag it out forever.
So I think you're touching on what basically is kind of our next question, which is like, and we've hit on this a little bit, but I want to just kind of make the point clear. So why do you fudge your dice rolls? Why do you pull your punches? Like what, give me a definitive answer of why you actually do it.
Number one is to be nice. If I'm a GM, I do it to be nice. If I'm feeling nice, and I'm also as a GM trying to have a good session and I want everybody to have fun. And it's not fun. I've had enough bad sessions to know that I don't want to end any session bad. So I'm not stupid, right?
Right.
As a player, here's the deep dark. Everybody hold your beverages. I have nothing against, if you have a jerk GM or DM, I don't have anything against players fudging their dice. Nothing at all. If the GM is being a jerk and not listening, and you're kind of like, man, I hate this GM. He's just out to get me, and he's being ad hominem, and he's picking on me. I don't care if that dice gets tipped. In my opinion, that's the exact same thing, right? It's the same thing. It's not. Okay. I wouldn't advertise it, and it's cheating. But fudging. What we're talking about is walking away from the construct and the confines and the framework of the rules to have an enjoyable session. And if you're getting one over on a jerk GM, it will bring you a little bit of happiness inside. I'm not even joking.
That's our vindictive Dan of the day, right?
And there's GMs that I wouldn't blink an eye. It wouldn't bother me one bit.
Are we talking about the Star Trek Gen Con experience, Dan?
Oh, not even him. I don't even care about that guy. I'm talking about people I still know today. I'm not talking about rando GMs from conventions I'll never see in my life ever again.
So I think one point, right, is like from the so you actually gave 2 points. One from the player's perspective, which is, if you are feeling like you're being given the shaft, maybe tilt the dice a little bit,
but
right?
only against another GM, not against other players. Don't do it to showboat against other players and try to be all that. You'll actually find it's more fun to fail rolls than it is to succeed.
I agree with that. The other thing is, you said, as a DM, you want to be nice, right?
Mhm.
Like you want to create a good, fun atmosphere so that the characters can feel like they're heroes still without, really punishing them, type of thing. So that's, you pull your
Yeah,
punches.
and if you're
I'm
making a
gonna,
movie in the head and you're not ready for the scene for all the pathos and death and it would mess up the story, don't mess up the story. Keep the
Yeah.
big picture in your head. Make this
Yeah.
a good movie, not a good simulation sometimes. That's fun.
The other example I would give is to make it harder, because sometimes balancing an encounter is actually kind of tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes because I know me personally as a DM, I have a hard time keeping everybody's like combos straight, everybody's like little traits or feats that they have going on, or
And they're showboating real
it's
fast on you, and you're like, oh.
yeah, and so they're like,
And they're
oh,
fudging
well,
their
now
rolls.
I can do this.
Oh.
And you're like, yeah, exactly. So all of a sudden, and look, I've been guilty of this in my D&D campaign. So for those of you that are in my campaign listening, I've given some of my monsters like double their hit points, or magically they have resistance to that type of damage that they're dealing.
And
because
5e has a section saying the DM is allowed to do whatever the DM needs to do for a good session.
Right.
Other games don't always have that. Some of them do, some of them don't. But D&D, it's very explicit. It says, in the player's handbook, it says it's the DM's job to make sure everybody has fun, and they can break any rule in any of the books to keep the fun rolling.
And, the thing is it's like, I do it. I do that because it's like, I don't want them to just like skate through the combat. And the interesting thing is that I do the milestone XP, right? So it doesn't matter how many monsters they kill in the game for their experience. Like that doesn't mean anything to them in this campaign.
They're not piling up owlbears like cordwood.
Right, exactly.
Oh, I feel like I'm better at doing a thing now because I killed 30 owlbears.
Exactly. So, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, they are clearly like, I've got one big baddie, but I've got, 5 pretty beefy player characters that are just wailing on this guy.
Yeah.
And they're getting natural 20s, and they're hiding and getting double damage, and, they're doing all their little combo tricks. And I'm like, you know what? Like, this guy needs to be able to swing back at least once.
Yeah.
Before he dies.
Well, and here's another core principle that sometimes the players don't want to be reminded of, that the game has to be fun for the GM too. That doesn't mean that a total party kill, a TPK, every session is fun for the GM. You have to be pretty sadistic to want to do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Don't do that. Sadistic.
But, it's fun for me to have them be like, oh, this isn't working out. What do we need to do differently? And it's fun to see them try to figure out things. That's where I get my enjoyment, is really like watching these people try to, these are my fellow gamers, right? These people.
Yeah.
Watching them kind of try to figure out like, oh, this isn't working. What do we need to do differently? How can we approach this differently? Why isn't this guy dying? And kind of having to rethink it, just because on the fly, like I'm like, this guy should be dead by now, but I need him to do that.
That is good. A good thing to do, especially, not necessarily, but especially if you can link it back to the broader story. Mm-hmm. Because if you're just doing random encounter tables, you might as well just not fudge anything. Just say, oh, this is how it went. Random encounter table, womp womp. But I don't have time in any of my RPGs to do a random encounter table ever. Right. Ever. It would be a luxury of a weekly game that I've never been able to play. So if you're stretching out, if you're only getting together once a month, and that 4 hours really has to count. Every combat has to count, which means it has to link back to story, which means the dice should help you do that. And if the dice are failing you, you need to do a GM fiat to right that ship just a little bit. Or you should do it if you think a character that should have had an opportunity to shine has not had that opportunity.
There you go.
Super, super great way to fudge. Just say, oh, well, because of you, everybody won, and it felt like you were not contributing, but you were the hero.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Like I've fudged the dice on monsters dying before they should have. you know,
Yeah.
because I'm just like, like this is like I can read the writing on the wall. This guy's gonna die in another 2 rounds. Like it's very clear, right? Like this isn't gonna tip the balance, and we need to kind of move on with the story in our session and stuff like that. And B, like, hey, this guy needs a bit of a win,
Yeah.
you know, so let's give him
Give
one.
him a win.
Let's give him a win, and he's the one that ends up defeating the monster, right? And hooray! Like everybody's happy. So, yeah, I mean, I think the reason why you fudge or pull punches or whatever is again to create a good time, right? Like that's, if you were to boil it down, you're creating a good time. And whether that's, you know, to not kill a character, whether that's to make the monsters a little bit harder, whether it's to like let somebody have their moment to shine, you know, it's to have a good time.
Yeah, and you'll notice that it will matter less what was happening in the mechanics of the game. Everyone forgets the mechanics and everyone remembers the story. Serve the story,
totally.
and sometimes character death does serve the story.
Yep.
Sometimes as the GM, it's important for you to remind characters of mechanical choices they could make if they want to make them to get a different outcome.
Actually, that's a great way of quote unquote fudging a little bit, right?
It's just
You're
to be
hey.
like, hey, I'm the referee, but I'm also in your corner. But I'm also the other boxer, right?
Yeah.
I'm playing 3 hats. I'm like, well, you haven't used this one. So I think Jay did it one time. I thought I had a spell to beat a rock monster, and it was the opposite, right? And he's like, think about what kind of immunities this thing has. And I was like, oh,
right.
He's shrugging off all my damage. Oh, I need to do something different. And that's in some ways that's better than tipping the dice. That's better than waiving a rule. That's like, hey, we're going to keep the rules as written. This game has a meaning. The construct has a meaning. But I know the game a little bit better than you, and I should give you some pointers that you might want to do. You don't have to. You still have agency, but you might want to do it.
So I just thought of another way to fudge. You kind of brought this. I think that's a great way, right? Which is sort of kind of pointing out ideas, or you know, sort of leading them down the path, right? But I thought of another way, which is it's really falls under the rule of cool. Okay, so a player says, I want to do this, and there is no rule that really would allow them to do that. But then you say, okay, well, tell me what you really want to do, and let's try to figure out a way to do that. And I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I don't even care if this rule exists. Here's what I want you to roll. To make it happen. And we're gonna go rule of cool with this. Like, I don't care if it's like in the rule book or not. And in fact, I've had some players sometimes be like, well, actually, you can't. And I'm like, I don't care.
And here's the actually.
Yeah.
Usually a player will come up with something that is a talent or an ability or a feature. They'll say, I want to be able to do this. And somebody who knows the rules really well, maybe it's the GM, maybe it's another player will say, you don't get to do that till you get to level 12. Or you had to spend your points on this, but you spent points on that. So you shouldn't be able to do this because you should be able to, because you can't eat the same popsicle twice, basically. And in that moment, the rule of cool is like, as a GM, you have to go like, okay, we are going to do it, but it's going to be different than what the standard. We're going to make a rule up on the fly that fits this scenario and fits exactly what you're trying to do, instead of saying what you're trying to do is you're not trying to roll a level 20 spell. You're trying to do something in an interesting way, but you always have to make it a long shot.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think this conversation sort of brings us to one of the last points, which is like, how should you fudge it, right? And when we talked about it initially, you said, well, you normally have your DM screen up in front of you when you roll the dice, and you're like, that said 18.
Yeah, and that's
when it was really a 2.
You know, GM screens. I know it's a holdover from the 1970s and 80s. I have. Mm-hmm. I'm looking on my shelf at 4 of them right now. I don't actually have them up. I have them off to the side.
And I like GM screens for the reference tables that are usually on them, especially for a game like RuneQuest or
if they were not designed by a crazy
40K
person,
or something.
Yeah,
exactly. But in general, I roll my dice in front of the players. Like, I almost never fudge the dice roll. Um, y- Here's how I fudge it. If I don't have a GM screen, I'll roll the dice twice. Like I sort of give myself disadvantage.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I don't have to do that. And in fact, there's usually not a mechanic for it. But when they see me rolling dice twice, like, what do they know what I'm rolling?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, like I'm doing that, or I'll roll something else and be like, okay, this is what I got. And obviously, it was the second one. And maybe a player will know that I did that, or maybe they won't, you know? Another reason to fudge a little bit, and I know I keep going back to this, another reason to fudge a little bit is to bust up the meta folks that
The
like know all the
metagamers,
rules for the metagamers, like to bust them up a little bit, right?
Because they're always
Keep them
watching
on their
what's
toes.
happening because they love the game
Yeah.
and they know what's happening and they're like they can do the play-by-play.
Yep. So, but if you start messing that up, they're like, wait, I thought they couldn't. You're like, maybe this isn't the monster you're thinking of.
Yeah. Maybe
Interesting.
memorizing the monster's manual is not as good of use of a time as you thought. Yeah.
So the thing is that you can fudge the dice roll behind this GM screen. You can kind of even fudge the dice roll in front of somebody, but what we've been talking about, right, which is allowing the rule of cool, which is having your monster pick different targets based on opportunity to maybe keep a player alive. All of these different types of things you can do without a GM screen.
Bend a rule to save a player's life, you kind of let
Yep.
them do that.
Right.
Without
right.
breaking the rule, you can be like, oh, can I just do this one time to save that character's life? I'm like, yeah, that is cool.
In our last session, the group split the party, and our buddy Mike, he had this brain-sucking crown on his head. And his memories were like fading away. He stopped remembering how to ride a bike, and like his third birthday party and stuff like that.
Mom's name.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, there was this tower that had this anvil with a magic hammer, magic anvil, and it could destroy magic items. Well, he couldn't get the crown off of his head, so they had to strike this thing with the crown on his head, right? Which did 10d10. Or 10d6 damage each blow, right? That's a number I made up, by the way. But I was like, dude, if you're hitting a dude with a magical hammer with his head on the anvil, it's doing some damage, right? So, and he had high hit points, but he's just wailing. So they split the party, and there's dudes like that are fighting them as like Mike's trying to hit himself in the head with this hammer, to get this crown off his head. And so it got to a point where our friend Casey was like, can I drink a health potion as a bonus action? I'm like, yes, you can, because they were just getting destroyed, and I'm like, yeah, you can, yes, you can.
This is the one time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, you have that on your belt, ready to go. So yes, you can drink it. So to me, like, that's the best way to fudge, right? Like, let it be cool in the moment. Let it happen. And you know what? Like, your players, like, if you do it well enough, like, they don't even think about it. Like, the rules lawyers may be like, well, actually, but who cares? They're having fun too.
Well, and we've given Star Wars a really hard time about not being lethal enough. That's fine. That's established canon. But what we don't give it credit for is the triumph and despair mechanic.
Oh yeah,
where
absolutely.
Somebody says, "Well, I want to be able to do such a thing," and you're like, "Okay, well and maybe they get a triumph." And they're like, oh, I got a triumph. And they're like, yes, you get to do this. And now you get to change the story in a good way. Because in that game mechanic, there's kind of a 1 out of every 12 chance if you're rolling a certain dice that even if you fail a check, you can still do something triumphant. And if there's a red dice, there's a 1 out of 12 chance that despair will happen. And I have manipulated despair so many times to get what I needed. So let's say I wanted to screw the players later and have a combat encounter that they were trying to avoid. I'm like, oh, well, you rolled a despair. The bad guys know where you are. Or, hey, you rolled a triumph. And now this other magical thing can happen in the narrative. That's a really good feature of the system that says
that is
when this thing happens on the dice, rules is written, something magical can happen that's not in the standard way we adjudicate how the dice say things should or shouldn't happen. Most games have that kind of like, if you roll a 20 on a d20. But you notice with 5e, they really watered down how great a 20 was on skill checks.
Yep.
And
Oh, yeah.
another
It doesn't
game's
exist.
kind of like, well, if you get double sixes, you get to re-roll them and add it to the 12. I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. And some games do it better
Yeah.
than others. But those moments of something extraordinary happening that's cinematic is actually why you don't need to fudge.
Right.
In those games, you roll the dice right in front of everybody and go, oh, look, it's a despair. Now something horrible is going to happen to you. And I just get, as GM Fiat, get to make your day a living hell. But hey, the dice rolled it. This is rules as written.
Yeah.
And they get the same
Yep.
thing with the triumph. So it can actually be, depending on what you're playing, look at the rules that you're playing in whatever game, whether it's D&D, and whether the GM should be like throwing advantage or disadvantage to people. Look at those opportunities to kind of bend the way. If the game gives you kind of a loophole to manipulate, learn where those loopholes are, and you'll say, hey,
Yeah.
look, it's on page 45. It's right. I'm not fudging anything. I'm just doing what's in the book.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I highly recommend learning that as a GM. Even if you're new to a system, look for those kind of cool moment bending loopholes. You'll usually find them in a modern RPG. You won't find them
Yeah.
in something from the 80s, but you'll find them in modern RPG.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So fudging has a negative connotation out there, right? I think because it connotates cheating
Yeah.
a little bit.
We never said that. We never said cheating.
We never said cheating.
Maybe I did say that.
And well, as you maybe as a player,
As a
right?
player.
But as a player, it's a little bit cheating. But as you pointed out in D&D book, it says GM has the arbitrary right to, and by the way, it says this in the Cthulhu book, it says this in the RuneQuest book, it says it in every book, pretty
A
much,
lot of
which
them,
is that the GM is the arbiter of what really happens on the table, and a good GM will know when, where, and why to fudge things or pull punches or do what they're doing, and it's really to create a better experience for everybody. And I would say that it's not a black or white thing. If you try to be black and white, like I never fudge dice rolls or whatever, well, then you're probably going to run into a scenario where your players are going to resent you.
No, but you shouldn't be advertising what you're doing, and that's
Right.
not cheating. It's just that could be your method as the GM to make a good session is to make adjustments in the margins, right?
Yep.
Nobody needs to know that. It's not like it's a secret. If somebody came after and said, hey, when that thing happened, what really happened there? You can say, oh, well, I used my GM Fiat and I made the world slightly different. It's in my bounds, but don't be advertising it. Don't be like showboating. Oh, then it becomes, we're not playing, I'm going to say Dungeons and Dragons. We're playing Dan and Justin, we're just at that moment where you make a big deal about it. Suddenly you're now in the backyard playing cops and robbers saying, bang, bang, you're dead. And the other kid says, no, I'm not. So you have to avoid that, because once you break that kind of conceit of getting together, of why the rules matter, it's really hard to glue it back together.
Yeah. Well, question to the listeners: did we miss anything? Are we, are there other ways to pull punches to, basically fudge what you're doing as a GM? Leave us a comment. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter. Leave us a comment. We'd be interested to hear how you maybe fudge your sessions for the betterment of your players, or maybe for the worsement of your players, as I like to say. So thank you for listening to us tonight. We very much appreciate you guys and all your support that you give. We love that folks are listening to our podcast. I mean, that's always a win.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
So yeah, exactly. So until then, we hope to hear from you, and have a good night. Thank you for listening.
Good night.